Bad lawyer jokes are an old genre. But if you're a consumer, finding a client-focused practice is serious. If you're an attorney, understanding today's ethical duty of care is critical. Anchored by current headlines and showcasing major legal minds, Ethical-ish speaks to consumers and attorneys about the modern, transparent law practice. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ethical-ish, the podcast that is both targeted at legal professionals out there as well as everyday consumers. I'm Paul Bamert. I'm your host of Ethical-ish for another great installment. Excited to have my guest, Ruby Powers, joining us. Good morning, Ruby. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. Thanks, Paul, for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're going to dive in. Ethical-ish is all about the gray area, what makes a modern law practice ethical or not. And particularly, we look at the consumer-facing law practices out there. Excited to have you because I don't know that I've had an immigration practice professional out there join us yet. So we're going to get to dive into a very interesting space. And I know you do a lot more. So why don't you give us a little bit of background of who is Ruby, those of out there who maybe haven't met you in all of the areas that you're working, but just give us a little color commentary, who you are and what makes you tick.
Thank you, Paul. I sort of divide into a few buckets. One of them is immigration. So I'm a board certified immigration attorney, and my firm's 16 years old this fall, and been practicing for 17 years, full service immigration practice based out of Houston, which means we do everything from family-based, employment-based investment, removal, humanitarian, and we even have some federal litigation practice with habeas and mandamus, and active in that space with the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Then the other area is law practice management. Coming from a long line of entrepreneurs, I thought, well, in that Venn diagram of law practice of running a business and the practice of law, it's law practice management. And if I can help other people be better at their practice and they can focus on the delivery of legal services to their clients, let's not reinvent the wheel. So I've written 2 books about law practice management, and my most recent one is called Power Up Your Practice, which is also the name of my podcast on similar topic. And I'm an adjunct professor on law practice management. So I love that space. And then I think within that is legal tech, which is how I also interact a lot with other media podcasts. And I'm on the ABA Tech Show board. And then I think my third bucket would be like advocacy for community. I once ran for state rep here in Texas, didn't make it, but still involved in the community and everything from immigration, healthcare, education, other things like that. So I think that's probably me in a nutshell. I also have a family and have some hobbies occasionally.
Yeah, I don't know where you fit it all in. I've gotten to know you over the last few months, and it's amazing what you pack into your every given day. And notwithstanding, we'll start with your immigration practice. I do want to go down that path. Obviously, if we think about change and chaos and all of the things that you're trying to help in the practice management, I would imagine that has to do with a lot of things that are maybe predictable and expected and you can kind of stay ahead of. But I kind of feel like, again, somebody who reads the headlines, I mean, immigration is in the headlines, constantly. So, maybe, start there. What is the current landscape of predictability versus just all sorts of things that are coming out of the blue for you and your practitioners out there trying to make the American dream possible?
Wow. Yeah. I guess what I would say is that like change is really like the theme of my life right now. We're just living in it every minute. It's getting so bad that I've contemplated putting an out of office on the weekend when I was thinking, wait, but that's when normal people don't work on the weekend. It should be a given. But clients are reaching out because of all of the news and things that are coming out. Let's just say I think there's been 400 to 500 policy changes in the last 9 months.
Wow.
Some of them are really big. Even small ones can have a big impact on our clients' lives. Huge changes in the case law of asylum, which temporary protected statuses are being continued and discontinued. The Supreme Court is regularly involved in immigration-related matters. I don't know any other practice of law that is seeing such rapid changes as immigration, especially in 2025. It is almost unhuman to keep up with all of the rate of change. I was speaking earlier with my senior associate, and I was like, it's really like there needs to be a refresh button of like what people are eligible for at that moment that day, that hour. But us as the attorneys are the refresh button. We are having to assess the client's needs. And the other thing that happens is we start talking about all the possibilities that could happen in the future, but we have to put a limit to that. I've heard some attorneys say, "Oh, yes, let me get out my crystal ball and then I'll help you." But I'm
Right.
like,
Oh man.
first of all, I don't have one. And second of all, it might be a little condescending to say that to a client. What I do is I just say, in a normal world or at this time, I preface almost everything I say with those words.
Yeah, no, I think about the ABA model rules of professional conduct, which is a lot of times where we start these conversations of ethical issue, where the gray area is as technology changes, as your consumer clients change. We've never really talked about it from the standpoint of, and I know it's not the bar that's driving it, right? The federal government in this case is driving the statutes or the interpretations of the statutes, but how does the idea of competency and communications, I mean, that's got to be really hard when things are just like you said. I think when we were at our conference, something about you go away for a conference and you feel like that you've lost you know months at a time just for being out of office for a couple of days because the changes are coming at you so fast. So is it harder to meet your ethical duty of care as an attorney, given that the governing body is just changing everything so fast?
I think it is, honestly. That's, I think, why I was saying, like, it's not humanly possible to keep up with everything.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're right. Like, if I spend today doing content and having consults, and if I don't listen to the news or read all the updates, then I'm not gonna be able to tell people what's really happening. I mean, I have a standing call on Monday nights that gives me a review of what's happening according to other attorneys, and if I didn't have that, or if I missed that, I feel really behind. And I literally went to 3 immigration conferences in the last 2 weeks. So I'm, like, really trying to stay on top of things, and that's not normal. I was doing a lot of speeches, but you're right. I think that we are getting into this dangerous space where how are we supposed to keep up with everything? Like, we have a divide and conquer type of approach. Like, we have about 20 or so team members, and so it's like, okay, you go stay on top of what's happening there. You go pay attention to that. You listen to that recording. You go to that CLE. Let's share what we're learning. But if you were a true solo or had a small firm and you didn't have that, you would need to build a team to keep up with everything. We do have the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they are doing a great job of giving us updates. But it's like the time to consume all of those.
Right.
And I liken it to I love board games. I ask my podcast guests, what's your favorite game? Anyway, it's like you're playing a game and a new game, you just learned the rules, and then someone says, "Oh, no, that's not the rule anymore." And they changed a couple of the rules in the middle of the game. And then you're like, "Okay, wait, I need to re-strategize." And then about 20 minutes later, they come out with a new set of rules. And and so then you're constantly turning your wheels like, "Wait a minute, what were the rules and what are the rules and what's my goal and how am I going to get from A to B?" And that's really what we're dealing with right now.
Right. Yeah, you're interpreting all of that. I mean, as I think about communication, a word that keeps popping up in a lot of the ABA and the local state bars, or just this idea of educating your client so that they can make good decisions. What's the hardest question that you've gotten in this from your clients, where they come to you looking to make a good decision and you're just like, I don't know. I mean, I know there's got to be some cases out there that are just really hard to give advice in this environment.
I think what they'll say is like, "What would you do?" And I mean, I'll really just lay out all the scenarios that I can think of at the moment. But then again, there's some crazy scenario that could happen. Things are freaking some curveballs that
Right.
we hadn't even anticipated. But, I think to sort of answer that question, what I have come to realization in the last few weeks is that we have to be comfortable in the vague and the unknown. We can only know so much. There are so many things being thrown at us at different speeds, and you're right. Like, I'm talking about immigration. But if immigration wasn't consuming a lot of my bandwidth, I'd also be talking about AI and technology.
Right.
We're basically at a confluence between the two, sort of like a tsunami hitting each other at the same time, and I'm out there talking to law firm practitioners and other practitioners about AI and technology. And I recently had a speech. I said, how many of you are afraid of AI? And like a lot of people raised their hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got to work on this. And then, but the other thing I said was like, look, we need to lean into whatever tools we have because what we're doing is very difficult. And if this can save us time and we can lean into this to be more efficient, provide better services, be more accurate, then that's what we need to be doing. And so that's really what a lot of my message is when I'm out and about. And I know like I love how like KSTAS has a system to help give that information out to clients because even that whole giving an update or the no update, if that can save an attorney or a staff like 5 or 10 minutes of not having to spend that time explaining that and just giving them whatever certainty we can give them, then that gets us closer to having a happy client and providing them some peace of mind,
Yeah.
which is difficult at this time.
Well, very difficult. Yeah, I think the idea of chaos transcends to some of these ideas in the AI era, right? The AI era is really large language models. We've had a lot of AI in our lives. I think
Right.
it's interesting that the headlines are so focused, but the reason they're focused is these large language models have really changed in the last year plus. And I think it's a great way to turn chaos into, a little bit of change management, at least if you can pump it full of all the language that is coming at you with policy changes and the like, right? To give advice and to distill it down quickly, to ultimately say like, look, this is the state of change. At least if you can articulate that, then you're doing a service to your set of clients out there. So that's great. Outside of immigration, I'm kind of curious. I see a lot of things. Again, I can give you some anecdotes from my standpoint. I'll give you one real quick. My church, we have a Spanish service at 1 o'clock. Used to be called the Spanish service. We don't call it the Spanish service anymore. It's just another service on the Sunday schedule. So I get into some of these ideas of safety and advocacy and boundaries. I think about it from immigration. Obviously, if we go in a public space right now and maybe make certain comments, we can get a target on our own backs from that sort of an approach. So I'm curious, not to go down that path unless you have a comment there, but also like other practice areas. I think about workers' compensation. If somebody is here legally and is working and has a problem, gets injured, are they likely to file for workers' compensation? Are they concerned about coming out of the shadows and being identified as somebody who is, has an immigration status, things like that? How does this, change in your world transcend to other practice areas in your observation?
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of a call I had recently where a PI firm hired us to help maintain a status for one of their clients that was in a horrible accident at work, and his wife had just had a baby, and they were able to get a visa for the wife to come help be there with him, but they weren't able to get one for the baby. And the wife's been living here, the husband's been getting medical care, and they haven't been able to see their child for almost a year because of some complications. And just thinking about how all the things that they're going through, their brand new child that's being taken care of by a relative in Mexico. But you're right, like, right now, like, the mom is planning to go back because she's between taking care of her husband, who's in a really bad situation, and going back to her child. But then when I told her, I was like, "You're probably not gonna be able to come back for many years. And how long is it gonna take for the husband to get better, to be able to leave, and what's the plan there?" Anyway, lots of scenarios and lots of difficult situations and hard decisions that clients are gonna have to make. But you're right, I think that if a person is status insecure, they're probably not going to speak up if they're not getting treated well at work or they're getting paid under the rate of what they really should be paid, or their OT or the PTO or their whatever is being, disappeared. They're just getting they're not getting those payments. I think with a PI situation, the police show up. In some cases, people who don't have a status and entered illegally, they're not eligible for bond at the
At the
moment of
moment.
this recording, where that's still under some litigation. So, people might just be like, who cares if I just got hurt? I'm not gonna say anything. I have a lot of clients are saying they don't want to go to work because they don't want to get picked up from ICE. They don't want to be driving without a driver's license. So I think even in a family dispute. Maybe they don't want to stand up for themselves because they don't want their immigration status to be brought to light. Going to a courtroom, like at the very beginning of 2025, they said like courtrooms were not safe spaces anymore. Before, under prior administrations, if you had to go take care of a ticket or go for family court or whatever, like it was still a safe space regardless of your immigration status. So, I mean, for those not practicing immigration, I think if you're not already piecing this together, there's a lot of people who live in our society don't have a status or had a temporary status. And a lot of those temporary statuses, like parole, temporary protected status, asylum pending, things like that, a lot of those are being taken away. And so that's why I'm saying status insecure, because that's what's happening. And so because of that, they're making decisions off of their what they know for their own safety and for their family, and they might not be pursuing their rights and leveraging what legal rights abilities they have and reaching out to lawyers at this time.
Yeah, they were following the rules, the base on the board game, the way it was being
That's
played,
right.
right? And now here they are, no fault of their own. The rules changed, and right now the determination is whether or not they continue to fight for that option. So obviously that there's a little bit of target on their back if they show up at the wrong place, the wrong time. How about your cohort of attorneys? I mean, I think about people that are appealing these changes, or you read about, a judge stopped it and it's being litigated. Some of this stuff is going in front of the Supreme Court. Have you seen where, I mean, again, you guys are like doctors, right? You take a oath. What is the equivalent of the Hippocratic oath that you would take when you become a JD? Is there an equivalent to that?
To defend the Constitution. I remember that was one that we took when we got
Yeah,
licensed.
nothing stronger than that, I would say. Absolutely.
And due process and the law, and then yeah, I mean, I think the medical analogy is resonates with a lot of people. Like, I've really been likening what we're doing as immigration attorneys as those ER doctors in the battlefield and MASH, and or an OR doctor or something like that, and we're just dealing with what we have, triaging what we can, and trying to stay positive, showing up every day. But every day is at night as well, because the stories
Right.
are haunting us, and we're constantly thinking, oh, what could we be doing better? How could we help people? But there's fatigue, there's trauma and PTSD. And we're also questioning, are we going to be a target ourselves in some capacity of being the advocates?
Right.
And so that is something that crosses a lot of our minds. I think a lot of times people just use recordings all the time for all their meetings. Some immigration attorneys don't want to do that. We don't record our Monday night calls. We just want it to be free to talk. Sometimes my clients and colleagues are saying, let's get on Signal. I don't want to use anything else. I'm like, okay, we're doing this. So
That's
those are
scary.
some of the things that we're having to live through right now.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. Again, it's sad that we're at that point of again trying to defend the Constitution. I know that's up to interpretation on both sides of it, but the freedom of speech to go through that process and to have that debate, that's healthy, right? That's democracy, and I think that's what makes us tick. So we're going to keep checking in with you, Ruby. Hopefully we stabilize a little bit here and get back. I mean, again, kind of coming back to those challenges, trying to run your law practice. Are you seeing that, you still have folks coming in and saying, look, I need representation? Likewise, what are you seeing from a professional level? Or are people leaving the space, the PTSD? We've done an issue or an episode on Ethical-ish about mental health and sustainability. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of challenges here to go to the mat and fight it, when every day is a struggle. I mean, what are you seeing in that sense within the practitioner space?
So there's a lot of different themes. Like, I think behind the scenes, a lot of immigration practitioners are questioning how long they can continue this. Do they have another few years in them at the pace in which we've seen last 7, 9 months? I'm out and about trying to talk about resilience and how to lean in on what we've learned from other difficult times, and how between our personal resilience and self-care to our team and our culture of collaboration and teamwork, as well as our organization and our tech stack, how we can be more resilient in times of rapid change. But going to part of your question about the clients and what are we seeing, we're seeing a slowdown in some respects, which it's mind boggling, because there's so much need, but at the same time, people are afraid.
Yeah.
And then people are not going to work. They're contemplating leaving the country, or people are just getting swooped up and detained, dropping off their kids to school, and it's a huge game changer. And so then they're thinking, what are we going to do? I think some statistics are saying 1 million people have disappeared from the payrolls in just the last 7 or 9 months. There's probably more to come with the ending of a lot of temporary statuses, like temporary protected status for Venezuelans are going to be ending really soon. You add up some of those temporary statuses, and that's maybe a couple million people who are eligible to work and out there actively. And that we're going to start seeing that in who's not showing up for work. People are having to find other options, and then it's going to start impacting the economy. It already is.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's fruit rotting who knows where all over the place. And then, what avocados are probably gonna be like $20 each or something. I don't know, whatever. But like, that's just one example of just like how it's we're all interconnected, and we
Yeah.
don't really see it until like it starts hitting us, downstream, and we're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And like that's still it hasn't hit everybody how it's impacting them.
Maybe it needs to. You're right. Like, I mean, I'm trying to think of what the end game is, but everybody, I almost feel like everybody has to feel that pain for a lot of folks to realize what you guys are fighting for and what the importance is in, what we take for granted in our gross domestic product and continuing to grow as a leading, sort of economic power, right? You got to have the pain hit everybody or else it's not going to change.
I think that is true to the part of change, right? Yeah. Like if there isn't a consequence, then people I've heard that said, then people won't change. That people are being hit with the change unevenly.
Right.
And it is hitting the people who employ them, the people that are in their communities, and the families that have mixed status first, and those who help provide services to them. And then it's going to continue to have that ripple effect around our economy. And even just the other thing, I mean, some people are like, well, people don't have status. Okay, whatever. That maybe that's what they're thinking. Well, just this last month, they talked about how they're going to charge $100,000 for every H-1B visa coming up in 2026. And that's having a big impact on it because you look at the companies that hire the most amount of H-1Bs, it's like Amazon, Walmart, some other ones, big names. We know these names. Now they're thinking twice. It's a big line item they hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
And what are they going to do? And where, complete operations are going to be sent abroad. Other people are going to snatch up that brain workers, and we're going to lose a lot of the innovation, that pipeline that we normally have through visas like that.
Yeah, that is pricing is elastic in this case. And your point, if it goes up too high, it's basically like saying it's not available. And yeah, you're right. I think it's a brain drain in so many ways. We won't go into that. So let's maybe come back around a little bit on the change. The chaos is there. I like to think we're all hopeful, glass half full, and that there is, I think about it, right? Like immigration has been a problem we've argued for many years, right? And I think the lack of being able to come to a solution maybe created this over rotation, if you will, of just like slashing everything, right? Creates another type of change problem. But what is the upside, Ruby? How do you rally the group? You talk about mental health and like, keeping your nose down and continuing to fight for the cause. Your Hippocratic oath to the Constitution. I know it's not the Hippocratic oath, but we'll analog to that. Yeah, what is the fighting spirit that we should have as our call to action here of trying to endure and get to the other side of this to where our practices and the people that we serve are on level ground?
Well, there's multi-prong. One of them is as practitioners, maybe we've never been challenged to this extent before, but this is where we're going to figure out what we're made out of. And I think a lot of us are more capable than we've ever been challenged. And we have a lot of the tools in us to be resilient. I mean, we went to law school, we passed the bar, we found a job in law. We've helped so many people, at this point, it probably helped thousands of people in my career. And it does create a ripple effect, them having more secure lives and for their children and their grandchildren. And so I think we just have to remember why we do what we do and keep up the good fight, and that we're more capable than we've probably ever been challenged before. And then I think to the other point you said, like, I think that immigration reform has been kicked down for many, many years. Like, I think it wasn't until since it's been since like the late 96, 97 when we really actually had some significant changes, which have created bottlenecks to where we are having to this day. But one thing I'm thinking is that once Americans see how much this change is impacting our community, our economy, our friends, our relationships, and our future, that I'm hoping the pendulum is going to swing the other way, where we're going to have hopefully comprehensive immigration reform, or at least a lot more forms of legal relief, and maybe taking back some of the harsh changes from 96, 97 that in many cases created bars that made people stay and couldn't leave. And so, you know why it's hard to get reform? It's because it's so complex. It affects so many different facets. And when the representatives, lawmakers get together, it just sound bites and they don't understand. And something sounds good right then, like, and then it creates this bottleneck 20, 30 years later. And they didn't really foresee that. And so that's really why I used to live in DC. I worked on the Hill. And then I said, you know what? I need to go become a lawyer, go get some real practice outside the Beltway, and then come back. So I'm still
Yeah.
outside the Beltway, but I'm like really in the weeds learning how it all affects, and when they write laws and legislation, they don't understand what the impact is going to truly make and how the policy and interpretations. So anyway, I guess back to that is just like I'm staying positive that we're going to see the pendulum swing. But right now, we've just got to do the best we can with the people we have, the knowledge that we have, the skill sets we have, and stay the course. But it's going to be tough. I think just listening into what other people who've done hard things, how do they overcome, and how do they build that culture and those muscles of resilience? That's really what I've been leaning into these last several months.
No, I think that's a great way to close it out and land the plane, so to speak. I mean, my recap to that is, get involved, stay with what you're doing. I think, again, it's all statutory at the end. Where you can take that, how those statutes, sort of work in the real world, again, regardless of what party you're in the local politics or in the Beltway. I think about it as sort of like a mother and father that maybe go through a divorce, but they've got a joint child. And to me, the American story is about immigration. I mean, very few of us can claim that they were on, that very first, boat that set foot here. But then even then, you can make some other conversations about native lands and whatnot, right? So when we go back to that and we think about immigration's importance in our history, it's important in our future. And if we don't come together and figure out those processes, again, it's complex. So I'm making it easy on a podcast, but maybe that's the call to action of our peer group, right? Get involved more, more and more. Keep doing what you're doing is all I can say as I read the headlines and I hear about what you're doing. Couldn't be more grateful, Ruby, that there's folks like you out there, fighting for those folks who ultimately want to get to where we are with the American dream and citizenship and being able to do the awesome things we're able to do in this society. So any other closing comments about change and chaos in the world?
Well, I think that there are some best practices, staying positive, having a good sense of humor, having a gratitude journal, reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing, what your true north is, and staying the course. And so leaning into those best practices of resilience is really what I would say, whether you're an immigration practitioner or even just trying to figure out how to run your law firm amidst all the change, including with technology, AI, LLMs, all the things that are coming to us from different angles. And using these best practices can help you, even though you might not have an exact playbook of where you're going and the rules of the game are changing constantly, but it'll help you see more light at the end of the tunnel and give you more clarity. So I think there are some best practices to lean into at these times.
Yeah, it's a mix of different areas to focus on, but I think you hit on a lot of them that can be helpful. So, Ruby, I appreciate you joining us on Ethicalish. If you want to meet Ruby, Power Up Your Practice is the name of your, I won't call it consulting, but you help out other firms out there as well. So you tap into her expertise both as practitioner, as technologist, but also right? All of those areas that keep us going and are important for the formula. So if you like what you heard on Ethical-ish, please check us out and subscribe on whatever platform you're using. Look forward to bringing you some other compelling topics and guests in our future episodes. But thanks again, Ruby. It was a pleasure having you and chatting a little bit on this topic.
Thank you so much, Paul, for having me.
See you next time. Thank you.
Lawyers and legal consumers, you are our audience and our biggest strength. If you find Ethical-ish a good investment of your time, please spread the word. Until next time. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.